sticks all week. You should do the intro.
Good afternoon. It's 3 p.m. in sunny Bangkok. Yes, it's 3 p.m. somewhere. I'm Alexei Melnikov, one of your co-chairs. Next to me is not Todd. This is our esteemed ex-area director for moral support. Todd is remote. Let's get going.
Oh, one thing. Correct. I am no longer the area director for Email Core. I hope you all had a good ride with me, but now Andy is in charge. He's in the middle of the room here. I will continue to assist with the mess I made. But anyway.
It's all very much collective mess, isn't it? Okay, very quickly, this is not well. It's still IETF week and we're still under IETF rules, so make sure that you are familiar with IETF processes and various governing BCPs. This is a very short list. Just as a reminder, code of conduct, treat everybody with respect, use the best technical judgment, don't attack the person, attack arguments. Okay. With that, we need so this session is being recorded. If you are local, please either use local tool to log in, or you can use full tool as long as you turn off all audio and video. Do we have a notes taker? Oh, thank you very much. That would be great. Agenda. So we'll spend most of the, I need to spend my 5 minutes on administrative things, and I will have, I think, one more slide on document status. We'll spend most of the session talking about outstanding AS issues and recent changes. Ken will present. I have presented draft Melnikov SMTP IANA cleanup 00 in mail maintenance. I have a few slides. I don't know if there is anybody else in the room or whether I need to repeat them, but when we get to them, let me know. Document status. Email format is an RFC editor's queue. SMTP was in the RFC editor's queue. I had a dance and beer emojis, and I have to do a small clarification. Oh, actually, our esteemed area director will do that. So,
Andy Newton, Art AD. I do like the fact that the very first official action as being a new AD is I had to take something out of the RFC editor's queue. But anyway,
you have to learn the hard way, right? All about the peculiar processes that you can invoke.
But I do think this is important because there's multiple email conversations going around. I just want everyone to be on the same page. This kind of went to this did go to approved status before we had a chance to do a last call. So we pulled it back out of the RFC editor queue to do a last call specifically for around the security considerations. So that last call will happen as soon as I get the text together. Murray's helping me with that, thankfully. There was something else I was going to say. Oh, yes. I appreciate all the help and effort everyone did to get it this far. So I know there were a lot of there's a lot of last minute, horse trading going on and everything. So I really appreciate that. But we're almost there.
Just keep your fingers crossed for the second IETF last call. Okay, and AS is post working group last call, and there are some issues, various issues that we'll discuss.
So I have a question about this. Does 5321 bis reference the AS?
Normatively.
Okay, so that's the misref that our CSR
Yes.
was talking about. Okay, thank you.
And format and SMTP reference each other normatively, don't they?
Format only informative.
Okay.
But we don't want them to go separately.
Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay, John.
Let John speak. I'll put myself properly.
How long are we anticipating this second last call being? The full 2 weeks?
Yes, the full 2 weeks.
Yeah, I think there are several people who don't want to voice at the mic what they think, how they feel about this, but never mind. Ben?
Yeah, maybe you're lucky and you're going to get a 9822.
That is the hope.
I think we did actually we did ask, did we?
Sorry, what?
RFC number, we want 98
Oh, you want the 21s, 22s?
and 23.
Me.
Well,
But no, we can go make the request.
Murray and I were going to walk over after this meeting.
okay, thank you.
This is Pete. I had a short conversation with Alice. Just to be clear, you're not allowed to reserve numbers like that. You're not officially allowed to reserve. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. You're not allowed to reserve numbers. But you never know what might happen by luck.
Yeah. Do we have to be naughty or do we have to be nice for the Christmas to bring us certain RFC numbers? Okay. Okay. One second.
I wish that was my slide deck and we'd be done.
Okay, hold on. Yeah. Here we go.
Okay, so unlike what Alexi posted there, we're now up to version 16 because I posted something earlier this week with some changes, but reviewing where we currently are, this first slide here, these 5 issues were resolved between IETF 121 and our second interim. Was it the first or second of 2025? Anyways, the most recent interim, these were closed. Since then, I've added some text to resolve some of these. Give everybody a chance to read those because I'm not going to read them for you. And then changes that are in version 16. So at the last interim, it was decided that we were going to reintroduce text that had been pulled out a few revs back that talk about empty quoted strings in local parts. And we also added an example of an empty display name. So this, again, the first half, the top half of this had been in previous revision. It was removed and now it's back in. And there is. Thank you. I'll fix that. Actually, I believe it's correct in the document. Bad cut and paste, but I will verify. Thank you, Pete. Okay, these three issues were all somewhat related, so I grouped them together here. They all reference this section here, 6.4. You'll see that there's 4 specs listed. The first 2 are just listed by name without any type of description. The third and fourth do have a little bit of description. And one of these issues requested that we did have a description. The other one asked, or the second and third from Alexi asked, we also reference OpenPGP and SMIME and LAMPS protection headers. So what I did with this text is I made it a bulleted list. The first 4 items are still the same, but I added a small description for SPF and DKIM. And I added a 5th bullet, which mentions SMIME, OpenPGP, and header protection. Alexi.
I think it's good so far. I think the only minor niggle I have is there is a separate section talking about SMIME as far as encryption is concerned. I just want to make sure that these 2 places are consistent, or at least if you read one, you don't get an impression that it only does signing on encryption and not both. I mean, I don't have specific text, but if you can just check them for consistency.
And if you can reread, and if you have a suggestion, please send along.
Okay. Other than that, that looks good.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned.
Moving along.
Can you hold on? Can you go back 2?
Oop.
Well, something broke.
Yeah, this died.
That died.
That died.
Can you go back 2? Oh, can I go back 2?
Issue 94 is what you're looking.
Oh,
Issue 94 is what you're
no.
looking.
slide clicker died. Yeah. Okay. So hold on.
That's what's busted.
I can't because
I'm still an area director. I'm still an area director according to the tool. Let me do that.
Still not because I'm. Oh, hold on.
If the clicker cell is in control, you can't change the slide deck, so you have to
I can ask my question while he's sorting that out. So you had a definition for SPF and one for DKIM.
Yes.
The DKIM one, there's people who you'll get in hot water with some people if you use that particular text. I suggest just asking the DKIM list. Can someone give me a?
Okay.
Sorry. Try. They want me to just go to, or they want me?
Is the clicker working?
No, I well, try now.
Yes. Okay. So you're done with the question?
Yes, that was all. I just that description. If you put that, I have some battle damage from doing DKIM's recharter, and that's all. Sorry. After doing the DKIM charter where I used language kind of like that, I got kind of beat up a bit. So I'm trying to spare you that. Just come to us and get some text, and I'll help you work on it.
Okay.
So Jim Fenton, on the previous slide, I'm wondering if you should be referencing the standards track version of DMARC rather than the informational.
It is now yet, but
Well, it hasn't been, but maybe you've got potentially a misref there until it is. But I think it would be better if it referenced.
Yeah, if there's something in the hopper, I'll change it to the ID, and then it'll track it.
But to be honest, RFC editor is pretty good asking us about documents being replaced. So
Still, just to make sure.
Okay,
and
that's fine.
I guess I've got a little bit of a question about whether it's worth mentioning ARC here, since it's an experimental protocol, and it's there, but I don't know. Just generally, do we want to be referencing things that are standards track here, or do we want to be referencing everything in this space?
That's up to the group. This text was provided by somebody in the group. I forget who it was, and I was just modifying it per Alexi's request in some other tickets.
Actually, I think that was original Teros text, which we extended. Anyway.
Pete,
With regard to Alexi's comment earlier about the reference to S-MIME in two places. So the two places, one of them is this authentication section.
Yes.
The other is the confidentiality section.
Yes.
And so it refers to S-MIME being one of the choices for authentication with signing and the other for confidentiality with encryption. So they are written reasonably independently and still consistently.
Okay. So,
thanks for looking, Pete. Appreciate
okay.
it.
You basically said you checked and you believed no further change. Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay, good with this so far? Okay, at the interim, we decided that generation of for clauses should be a should not rather than a must not. I don't recall the exact reasoning
That's
for that.
to make it consistent with the
Consistent
base spec.
with 21, right? Okay.
John has a good point that whenever we reference S-MIME, we should also reference OpenPGP. So actually, you need to reference it in both places.
What do you mean in both? I think it already is both.
No. Is open.
Pete is looking.
They are both referenced in both sections.
Okay. Pete is saying that they're both. I like how we're creating issues and Pete just, no, it's already done. It's already done. Okay, so John, OpenPGP is already referenced in both places, so I think we're good.
In addition to these changes, John also made some editorial changes which helped clarify some things. They weren't related to any specific issue, but I think it improved the text. That was from between 14 and 15. John did that. Remaining open issues, 92 has been hanging around for a while. I don't know if we still care. John had talked about providing text. I think John probably now has more free time since 21 is almost fully baked. So maybe John can provide some text. John, are you there? Are you still interested in this issue, John?
John, you don't want to share slides, you want to talk.
Sorry, bad effects of it being 4 a.m. I've been told I'm interested in this issue. I personally don't care, and I will write text the moment that that a certain other document whose name will be unmentioned is put to bed. And you can assume that I started writing it within the last 24 hours and then stopped.
I mean, the origin of this, there was some issues raised on the base spec, for which we had some edits as far as CNIMs are concerned. But we preliminarily thought that we need some clarifications in AS. Whether or not this is still true, I don't know. So, John, if you try to write text and decide that actually there is nothing to say above what's in the base spec, that's perfectly acceptable.
Well, except for the fact that one of the reasons why this got moved here was because we got some external input of I don't remember whether it was during last call or earlier, that this had to be discussed in more detail. And
Okay.
I discussed it with some DNS experts, including some people very active in DNS Hop, who have thrown up their hands in various directions. So, in some sense, if we start a new last call and confine it to security issues, there is some chance that somebody will protest that we didn't address this, which they thought we promised to protest last time around.
Okay, so I think the short version is we're still keeping this issue. You will suggest some text, yes?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, issue 113. I'm not sure how many people were looking at the list, but Pete suggested some text earlier today. Fairly straightforward. He just wants to rename sections 6.2 and 6.3 as shown there, and also change all instances of optional to opportunistic and required to enforced. Totally up to you.
Actually, I think it makes sense because of optional and required have special meaning as far as RFC 2119, even if we're not using them in uppercase. So actually, because there are better terms, make it unambiguous makes sense.
Yeah, what Alexi said. I thought it just made it a little sharper and wouldn't tend to confuse people.
And in addition to these changes, Pete also suggested that we add this new text, this new paragraph to the end, which you all can read and comment as you see fit.
There was some light editing between when I sent and what is in the slide. So what's on the list is just slightly different than this, but this is what I like.
Yeah, the only change is there was a phrase that was missing. As I read it the second time in the last session, I noted that there was a phrase missing, which is now in there.
And Rob gets his reference to BCP 61.
So the last sentence, the must, is it incoming or outgoing connections or both?
The way it's written, it looks like it's for
It was
incoming.
intended for incoming because that's the requirement for interoperability. Right?
Yeah, but you can also be talking to a legacy system that might not. So I just thought I'd ask.
Barry.
Yeah, all right. Sorry for not punching the button. What, Pete, before you sit down, why would there not be the same interoperability issue outbound? You have to be able to send to the MTA that you discover, and that MTA doesn't support Start TLF.
Fair enough.
So what is the suggested change to this?
We might want to just spell it out. You reckon?
We don't need to wordsmith here, but I mean, the current sentence is you have to be able to turn it off, and it doesn't say for which direction. We can be explicit that it means for both directions.
Okay, yeah. That's where I was going with this, actually, yes.
John's up.
John?
I'm afraid of attaching a must to the sender side because it's going to mean that a bunch of implementations that are using SMTP heavily today, even in protected environments where this is meaningless security theater, are suddenly made invalid because they have no mechanisms for turning this on. And,
No, it doesn't say you have to be able to. It says you have to be able to not turn it on.
On the sending side, okay, then I'm confused, and this text is probably going to need some slightly more twitching than
Yeah, I think you're right, John. Because it does up in the middle, it does say that you have to implement Start TLS. Basically, it says you have to implement Start TLS in your software, and your software has to be configurable to turn it off. So what John is saying is, what about older software that can't even turn it on, and what do you do?
So let's remember what must means. Must is used when it is necessary for interoperability or to prevent damage. The fact is that if you have something that cannot send, that does not implement Start TLS, you will potentially cause damage. And therefore, insofar as we want to talk about conformance, and you all know that I don't think that we make conformance statements here, those would be non-conformant implementations if they can't implement Start TLS. Tough noogies. They will cause damage if they are released on the open internet. What this says is, in order to protect security, you must implement Start TLS, which is true. This says, in order to allow for interoperability, you must be able to not use Start TLS, which is true. End of story. Nothing more needs to be said.
Then if we're going to go that direction, then the applicability statement needs an introduction which says that it applies to use on the open internet. And if it's not being used in the open internet, but is being used in some other environment, the applicability statement isn't applicable, it doesn't count.
At one level, I want to say, sure. But the only time we're writing proposed standards is for use on the internet. That's what we do. If you want to use something that is not going to be used on the internet, I don't know what we get to say about it.
Pete, it depends on what you mean by the internet. Because we are running around making statements about requirements on MUAs, which are attached to receiving MTAs, and the practical internet, public internet, private internet boundary is on the sending side or the MTA MUA connection on those things. And we have made a relatively big deal about staying clear of that boundary. And that difference affects 5321 and 5322 as well.
Let Ben go.
Okay. Ben?
Sorry, but I'm a little bit confused about this discussion on, I have three questions actually about this. First, the sentence for me is very confusing because I read it so that the administrator must have a way to configure so that Start TLS will never ever be used even if it's available. And I don't think that's what you mean. So Start TLS is basically always opportunistic unless you force it on. So if it's trying to say you should be able to configure to force Start TLS or it to be opportunistic, then that's not extension not to be used. That's not what it means here. So that would be my first comment on that.
So the intention of the last sentence, because that's what we're talking about, is that I need to be able to configure my SMTP server such that I will allow connections without Start TLS.
But you're not forcing TLS off. You just allow it to be not working when the other server doesn't say it, right? Speak it.
I don't care personally, and I don't think we should care whether or not a server should be able to say, I never want to do Start TLS and I'm going to remove the option from the options list. I guess that's a legitimate way to write a server too. I could have a configuration option for that, but having that is not essential for interoperability. What's essential for interoperability is that I need to be able to receive from things that will not do start TLS.
Yes, okay, I understand your intention. What I'm pointing out is for star TLS, there's three states possible. A is I'm forcing star TLS and I will always use it. And if the other party doesn't speak star TLS, I will drop the connection. That's option number one. Option number two is, which is enforcing star TLS. Option number two is opportunistic star TLS. I will speak it when the other party does. And if the other party doesn't speak it, I will talk to them in plain text. That's opportunistic TLS. And then there's the third option, which is forcing star TLS off. And I will never speak it even if the other party does. And the way I'm reading the sentence is that you mean 3 and not 2. And you mean 2. So that's why the sentence not clear.
Right.
I will attempt a rewrite of the last sentence that makes it clear that it's 2 that we want. I think that's what we want.
Yes, and actually by default, I think star TLS as written as a SMTP extension is opportunistic. Other things made it non-opportunistic through tweaks to it.
In reality, you need to configure the sending side to not send the command. The sending side doesn't have to use any extensions advertised by the receiver, right?
Well, if the receiving side doesn't advertise star TLS, then it will not be used. Now, there is a case when the receiving side advertises star TLS and it's broken. I don't think we are talking about this case either.
So
that's a lot. That helps a lot.
Here's, let me let Bron and John go, and then I'll may have to bring up something else.
I really don't like this style of text, I've got to say. We're putting a must in for something which is a consideration at a different level, and I would feel a lot happier if this said must support start TLS or some equivalent level of confidentiality, rather than mandating this particular technology and locking it in as the way that you provide confidentiality on that link. And once you do that, you don't need to worry about so much of all the rest of it, because you just say it has to provide this level of confidentiality, not a whole heap of stuff around must use start TLS.
John?
Yeah, I just want to be very, very careful. I think that that saying the servers must support this is fine, appropriate with appropriate configuration options. But I think as soon as we get into specifying the sender must support this, we're in trouble, and we're in trouble for a whole series of reasons, of which the one Bron just identified is a very important one. And it's not public internet versus private internet. It's protected versus non-protected environments.
Okay, go back to the mic then. Oh, I think that's people from before. Ben, did you want to say more on this?
Yeah, I had actually a second one, and that is why, just throwing it out, why start TLS? Why not just do straight TLS and say you have to use TLS, and if the other server doesn't speak it, then that's fallback into uncharted territory. But Google and others enforced HTTPS on the web. Why can't we do the same for email and just say we all start to talk TLS now, period, and those who don't speak it? Because there is actually, and that's information I wanted to bring. There is quite some movement, at least in Germany. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. That are saying we only will talk TLS, and we'll among those specific providers that have this agreement, they will never ever talk anything else than TLS, and they made this agreement and they advertise for that. And the bigger the circle goes, the better we will be.
So, Bron's point and John's, I think, are the important bits here. And I'm happy to rewrite where, for the first part, the requirement, it's you must implement some sort of confidentiality. That might be being in a protected environment of some sort. That might be with Start TLS. That might be with some other encryption that comes down the line. That might be with something else. We can write it that way. I have no problem with that. So if that gets over the private versus public debate, and we're saying you must have encryption to do these things, or you must have confidentiality, is probably the more precise way to put it, to do these things, peachy. On the tail end, I have currently seen implementations that have an option, perfectly good as an option, that say, if someone tries to do auth or login before negotiating Start TLS, I say, no, go away, right? That's a good option to have. If that was not an option in an SMTP server, if it hard-coded said, you don't do Start TLS, I'm not letting you send email at all, that would be bad. And so the two things I think we agree on, and maybe this needs a rewrite, is must use confidentiality, which is true. If you don't use confidentiality, there will be damage to network because of et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Must be able to receive without confidentiality. Those are the two requirements. And I think those are both true.
I think they're both true as well. And if you can get that right, then I think we're probably okay. There is overqualification, which is that as you're writing that, you need to be very certain that you're not talking about what SMTP servers do, because at the risk of channeling Dave Crocker, which is a very uncomfortable position for me to be in, we've got a layering problem here. And that layering problem is that the SMTP server, as an SMTP server, may have absolutely no way of knowing whether there's confidentiality going on, because it may be going on in the containing environment. So that text needs to be written very, very carefully. And of course, that's the essence of the other piece of the problem here.
Hi, Jim Fenton. One other thing that hasn't been mentioned is that there are firewall products out there, and we've even seen them used at the national level, although this data is several years old at this point, so I don't know if this is still going on. Used to be that Tunisia would block or would essentially rewrite SMTP transactions so that Start TLS would become STAR XXXX or something like that in order to interfere with the negotiation of Start TLS. So that's another, the last sentence there in terms of maximizing interoperation. That's another reason why you need to be able to accept messages that are not Start TLS, is because there may be a situation that you just can't communicate any other way because of these middle boxes that are interfering. Also to the earlier point about requiring Start TLS before login or something like that is a little bit different situation, because that's usually a situation where you're doing authenticated submission and you don't have those kinds of middle boxes in the way, hopefully. So you can do it there, but it's a different situation, I think, when you're talking about doing SMTP relay as opposed to submission.
This speed, I totally agree with the latter. I was using it as sort of a dumbed up example because I don't think people would actually turn that on as a hard key in the normal sense, but making it clear. So let me disagree with something that John just said. This is an applicability statement for SMTP, for the protocol. And the fact is that TCP has retransmit timers that have musts next to them. And yes, if you use it in an environment where it's some sort of closed environment where those retransmit timers don't need to be seen, the must is still in the protocol. The fact is, for SMTP to have reasonable confidentiality and to prevent risks, it must have confidentiality. And yes, there are environments you could use it where it would be completely redundant. But for SMTP to be confidential and to be safe, it must have confidentiality. If you don't want confidentiality, good, don't use it. But that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about there is the potential for damage if you don't do it at the SMTP level. And so I simply disagree with this idea that if I know that I'm in an environment where things don't matter, I should therefore not have to say about the protocol that things do matter. It's not the way we write our documents here. John's up first. You might want to call.
John? I kick you out, yeah?
I think I want to hear what Barry has to say.
Okay, this is Barry Lee, but I hate analogies, but I'm going to make one anyway. It would be bad to have a car that you couldn't lock. You don't have to lock your car, that's your choice, but we're telling the car manufacturers that you would be putting out a crappy car if you didn't have locks on it. And I think that's kind of what we're saying here. If you want to deliver a product that says it's SMTP, it has to have a lock. People can choose not to use it, and in fact, you must allow them to choose not to use it if they want to. That's all. So you're right, and Pete said, and people could rip the locks out too, just like people used to disable their seat belts until they realized that that was a bad idea. So anyway, that's all.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that analogy is moderately persuasive, but let me remind people that when we first specified IPv6, we did something interesting. We never took it out. And that was to provide link level encryption at the IP level. And if I know that link level encryption is being provided at the IP level for everything I'm doing, and I know I'm operating over IPv6, then at best, turning on TLS is security theater. And that's problem number one. Problem number two is that we continue to behave and make statements about confidentiality between originator and receiver. We make statements that at least sound like it's confidentiality between originator and receiver. And our other problem, which is part of where this started, is that is not a level of confidentiality which TLS provides. Because the nature of TLS, of SMTP over TLS, is that those transmissions are in the clear on every intermediate relay machine there. And if those relays can be compromised, then you do not have confidentiality. You've got link encryption, hop by hop, but you do not have confidentiality. And this gets into what I hope we're getting to later, which is the need to talk about that particular problem here. But let's be a little bit careful about the language.
So yeah, Pete, just in the chat, we need to distinguish between must implement and must use. And I think your first must about must implement is correct. I think people are arguing more about the last sentence.
Yep.
So
I still think it's just a word.
yes.
Repeat that.
Barry is saying that he thinks it's mostly wordsmithing issues. I tend to agree.
I will make attempt number 2. And I do want to make sure there's no one else who wants to run up to the mic in the room who wants to say, no, we should say something other than must implement transport security between servers, something along those lines, or confidentiality between servers. Because, I mean, what I'm looking to do, and I'll probably use Start TLS as the example rather than the specific. What I'm thinking is, what I want to say is, must implement confidentiality between servers, make it clear that this is SMTP to SMTP, that's all you're getting, and must allow for lack of confidentiality for interoperability purposes. What's that? Conservative in what you send.
Yeah.
And in this case, conservative in what you receive too. No one is running up behind me with knives. I will consider that instructions to try attempt 2 this evening and send it to the list.
Yeah, the first part of that was essentially mandated by one of our IESG reviewers anyways.
Yeah.
And we need to add the second part for interoperability.
I think I liked your version of the text of must be able to receive without confidentiality. It might be saying the same thing as the last sentence, but it's in a way it's somewhat clearer about the intent. Okay.
Time to move on.
Okay, so my feeling is we're nearly there, but not quite, and Pete will do another attempt, and hopefully even this week. Challenge accepted. Well, sorry. Yeah, I'm accepting challenge on your behalf. So, well done. Okay, next.
All right. The last 2 were both part of review by Rob Sayer. You can see he put this in the issues himself. My question is where, if at all, where do we want to put this? Does this belong to security considerations, or is this going to belong in the section where we're already talking about confidentiality? My gut tells me security considerations, but I will defer to what the group says.
Yeah. I think security considerations somewhere. Yeah. Well, try to add some text to security considerations. We can always move it if we find a better place.
Okay.
So on this issue specifically, I agree that seems like, well, we talked about it already today about, in a way, firewalls, disabling hello advertisement.
Jim has an opinion.
I think it's useful to talk about that, but I'm not sure. Well, MTA STS is not the only solution we have to that problem. So I think a more general statement would be useful. There isn't deployment of required TLS, but that is another standards track protocol that we have that solves this problem.
Sure.
Fair enough.
Okay. Do we mean that we just need to extend this a little bit and make it more generic? I'm looking at Hans York, our minute taker. Can you minute the request to just make it slightly more generic because there is more than one mechanism to do this? I think there are 3 actually, right? Dane and required TLS. So the other 2 are mentioned in another
Do
section.
we want to mention all solutions to that problem, or just use one as an example? I don't care either way. I'm just asking the question.
We'll try some text and we'll see.
Okay. Apparently, I am.
Yes.
This is the other issue that Rob Sayre came up with. I'm actually confused by what he's confused by, but
I think this issue is invalid. Actually, I commented about, but the explanation, I think, to his question is how come you can have opportunistic TLS without authentication is in opportunistic TLS case, you can still invoke start TLS, but you might be unable to verify certificate. In this case, you proceed anyway. In this case, server is not authenticated.
Right.
So I think the text is
Rob's confusion is that he doesn't think the the TLS handshake will complete if you can't validate the certificate. Right.
But it's definitely different state and implementation because it does complete, but it's just a question of what happens after that.
Yes.
So do we want to add some clarifying text to that effect?
It might be worth it.
Okay. Do check. I think the current text is written is clear, but do double check.
I think that was the last slide. It is.
So there were a couple of things that was mentioned in my review for which I forgot to create tickets until now. So one ticket was about reference to what working group syntax for email addresses. We decided that we don't want that. That's on the slides from the last interim, and I think in the minutes.
So we want to remove something from the current text, is what you're saying?
We want to replace ABNF and not reference what working group.
Right. Okay.
You might not have.
Do you want to create the issue and
I did.
Throw some suggested text in there? Or at least provide some instructions as to what you would like to see?
Okay, I think the possibly we might need to iterate on this. I think the idea of the syntax was to, it's not the most generic syntax of everything that should be accepted as a mail address, but it's the one that is interoperable. So I think it's the one without quoted string. Or maybe, well, okay. So I'll try to do something. I think instead of starting with what working group syntax.
Yeah, this is the text that was referring to what you should and should not do in web forms with regards to email addresses.
Yes, and yeah, it was allowing multiple dots, sequential dots, and stuff like that. So I think we probably should start from what's in define as address in this MTP spec and takes choices out that we believe are less interoperable.
Okay.
Okay. How about we collaborate on this? The other thing, I had some comments about clarifying which identities are being protected and which things are hop by hop with end to end. I was asking them as a question. If you want me to rephrase a specific suggestion, I can have a look at the recent text. And
That'd be great.
okay.
My name in the boilerplate says editor, not author. So I will take any text you'd like to provide.
You're very suggestible. Say it again.
Do you want to have something that protocol process last to sync?
Ken and Alexi will collaborate on resolving the two issues he created. Since he created, he can help fix them.
I didn't break it, just observed it, but okay, fair enough.
John, did you have another comment, or are you just lingering in the queue?
Oh, no, I had another comment.
Okay, go on.
Which is that the other issue which keeps getting lost here, and I think is important. If I'm in the rough, then I'm in the rough, but I'd like to see consensus call on the list if you're going to make the declaration I'm in the rough. Is that if we're going to push link encryption, then this document needs a careful explanation of exactly what the implications are when we say, in the words Pete used earlier, SMTP to SMTP, or whatever it is we use to make clear what the vulnerability is if somebody starts thinking that TLS is end to end. That's one kind of issue. The other kind of issue is something I need to go back and check, or somebody else needs to check. It's just that in some of these discussions about, for example, Start TLS, we seem to be missing the fact that there's a prohibition, I think, in 5321 against sending stuff which is required, which is associated, in which the sender sends stuff associated with a particular extension, when that extension has not been advertised already by the server. And I can't remember how strong the language is in 5321, but we either need to be sure that's clear in 5321, or we need to discuss it in this document. And if we're reopening 5321 for whatever reason, especially potentially security related, doing it there is an option.
Okay, Pete.
On John's second issue, for reasons I hope everybody understands, I think even thinking about reopening 5321 for that should be avoided at all costs.
Thank you.
On the first issue, actually, I like this idea because as we were going through the discussion with folks about the required Start TLS, or whatever we're now going to call it, already got text. One of the things that came up was that TLS has, even using it, it has all sorts of failure modes, which are really interesting. Like if you can screw around with the DNS, you can convince, a server that anything is its MX record and send it off, and it will happily use TLS and go to the wrong place with very strong encryption. So I think this is an interesting point for security considerations. It's probably just a paragraph, and it's a reminder that, and maybe we put it actually in the confidentiality section in section 6 and say, big letters, remember that server-to-server confidentiality only gets you so far. And I think that's a good reminder to put in this document, and I think we can be much more explicit about it. But that server-to-server doesn't get you end-to-end confidentiality, and that's an important point, And I think it's worth saying in this document.
It's a
Do
more
we need an-
complicated analysis page, but server-to-server authentication doesn't get you end-to-end authentication either.
That's
if
right.
the intermediate systems are capable of tampering with, for example, the headers.
Do we need a new issue for this? I mean, it's part of
If
this.
you can
also.
describe it,
Yeah, I
would
think
you
I
like
can.
to create it? Because
Ooh, how exciting!
because at this point, I'm not sure how to name it.
Yeah, it's just a discussion of end-to-end versus hop by hop
Exactly.
confidentiality and authentication. I think
Exactly.
it's worth mentioning.
Yeah.
And we've had pieces of this conversation several times before. This is not a new issue. Thank you.
You're happy to go to GitHub, right? You know where to find it. Okay. I think that's it for this session. Does anybody wants to hear my IANA, SMTP IANA cleanup thing again?
Yes. No. Are we all clear that that's going to go to MailMate?
I think yes, you said that our charter doesn't allow it, so it makes sense to do it in mail
Yeah.
maintenance.
So that is my understanding of both the charters for MailMate and Email Core. I will actually ask Murray if he agrees with that, but that's how I read them both.
So the question is, were we doing that here or over there? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
I think I managed to convince myself that either one is fine. So if this group has a preference to do it, I realize that folding it all into 5321 would be a pain, or
No, we don't want- well,
then fine. Mailman can do it. We specifically chartered it to recharted it recently to capture that possibility. So if that's what you want to do, bring it on over.
I would be more comfortable if we did it that way.
Sure.
All right. Thanks.
Okay.
Channeling John. John also thinks it's out of scope for this working group.
As an editor of this still individual draft, that's perfectly fine with me. So okay. With that, any other issues on Email Core? Yes, John?
I guess I'm not successfully typing rapidly enough. And so before you close the session, the explanation of why it's out of scope is the charter is very, very specific, that we are not able to take on additional work until the 3 base documents are finished. Murray is nodding. And that makes this particular piece of work either out of scope or part of 5321. Right. And strongly endorsing Pete's earlier aversion to opening 5321, the other answer is it's out of scope.
Yeah.
Now, whether it is in scope for MailMate while Email Core is still active and circling around these issues and could in theory put it in 5321 is another question.
Hold on.
Okay.
I was ready for that. Hold on.
While you're getting yourself even readier, for all practical purposes, like 95% of people participating in MailMate and Email Core are the same. So unless people will start to object to themselves in different working groups.
Okay. We wrote the charter for MailMate very carefully. It says chartering of a dedicated working group with a custom charter is strongly preferred when engaging any work that updates any base email documents. Strongly preferred leaves area director discretion in play here. And I will buy Andy drinks if he thinks that that doesn't allow this work to go to MailMate. So I think we're good.
The difficulty, Murray, is that in the discussions of that charter on the IETF list and the last call list, I believe the community was discussed and was promised that MailMate would not take on things which were part of the subject matter of an existing working group.
That's true. I remember the intent. Okay, so now we're getting into what I was thinking when I wrote this versus what actually made it down. The intent of that was to say MailMate will not dabble in your protocol space. Not that we won't help you with can't help you with registry stuff. I think that we've created a bit of a gray area that we can slip through here. But I can't make promises. I can't make promises that someone's not going to raise a stink about it.
Yeah, the difficulty, and I am neither going to promise to do this nor promise to not do this. But the difficulty is that Andy could set an all-time record for length of time in service as an AD before his first appeal.
This is Ken.
I'll help him.
I would make the argument that this has nothing to do with the core specs, other than the fact that we're just updating a registry that was created by the core spec, but we're talking about extensions, which eMore core isn't touching.
Yes. Well,
that's very true. That's the argument I was making earlier. So
I think we're fine.
I think we're fine.
Okay.
It's a long tradition. End the meeting.
Okay. On this note, you get 23 minutes back.
Time to go get ready for.
Ken, when do you think Ken and John, when do we have another revision?
It's the
20th.
For me, the answer to that question is after we finish 5321. So I hope Ken has a better answer.
2 weeks.
Okay.
Last call requested.
I think Easter is 20th. I'm just bugging editors about when they are going to do another revision. So, okay. Sounds good?
Those slides good? Okay.
Andy, before you sneak out of the room, it would probably be a very good idea to get review of this last call onto the ISG agenda as soon as that last call closes. Because otherwise we're going to go back into this loop of sitting around waiting indefinite periods of time for the ISG to consider that. And that could easily take longer to call.
Sorry, John. The intent is just to do a last call to confirm consent. This does not have to go back to the ISG. This is once we have on the record that nobody's continuing to object to any security things, it goes right back to the editor.
Yeah, don't phrase it like this, because if you say object to any security things, we can always object to any security things.
You'll see when the text comes out, it's very targeted to
what
came out of that review. Are we good now? That's the question, basically.
Yeah, it's very specific about. In fact, there's a diff in there. So.
Okay, I think that's great, and I hope you can convince the moderators to deal with the obvious suspect when he goes ahead and raises broader security issues again.
Would you please stop calling me the obvious suspect?
You're not the person I'm referring to.
It's worse than you think. I hope I was helpful.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Which were the two issues? So 137 was one of those you want to discuss with Ken? And the other one was?
Now it's closed.
7, not 6.